I'm Mary Anne Grady Flores. We've just finished with our day in court. We're in front of the New York State Court of Appeals behind us, the highest court in the state. And with me is attorney Lance Salisbury, who defended the appeal and has been on the case for 4 years.
Doesn't seem that long. My name is Lance Salisbury. This case basically involves the use of an order of protection to try to basically impose prior restraint on protesters. This was one of a number of orders of protection that were issued to try to keep demonstrators away from the base where nonviolent protests were occurring. The issues that we raised in the appeal that come out of the case are that this was a invalid order of protection. It didn't meet the statutory requirements of an order of protection, which have a limited purpose under New York law. Here, the order was basically issued to protect property, keep people away from the base. The colonel who requested the order didn't meet the statutory requirements of being either a victim of a crime or a witness as required by law. There was no good cause shown for the order, and the order was so overbroad and vague that it violated the First Amendment rights, the speech rights of Mary Anne Grady Flores, and it violates the same rights of all the other demonstrators who has also received these orders of protection. So those issues were all discussed thoroughly in the briefs and in the 4 amicus briefs filed in support of Mary Anne at the Court of Appeals. What we discussed today, what occurred today, was the 7 judges on the court have read the briefs, as I think those who were in the courtroom saw, pretty extensively, know the issues here very well. And so they had a series of questions just to highlight some points and hear the arguments on those. There were arguments on a couple of procedural issues within New York law that you always have to deal with. And then their main concerns that were raised were the First Amendment rights issues of Mary Anne. In particular, there was a lot of discussion of Schenck, which is a Supreme Court case that deals with anti-abortion protesters in Buffalo, and how how the Supreme Court recognized that issue. It recognizes that any restraint on the First Amendment rights of a protester has to be very narrowly and precisely drawn, and that was lacking, we argued, in this case. The term stay away is so broad that it doesn't give a clear definition of what Mary Anne or anyone else has to do to comply, and it also basically imposes prior restraint upon her First Amendment speech rights, in that in order to comply, essentially she can't engage in any demonstration, which is overbroad and unconstitutional in our view. Those were the key issues at the court. The court had some questions mainly on that and on the statutory issues. It seems clear the court has real concerns over the statutory application and use of the statute in this case.
Yeah, that's great. And how did you feel that the court was receiving the arguments? They were they were very receptive, I think, to the arguments. They had some real concerns over the use of the statute. That was clear from their questions. We'll see how they decide, but it's clear they've read the briefs, and they have some clear concerns over how the statute was applied in this case. Okay, thanks, Lance. So I wanted to begin by saying I am very grateful for all the supporters that are here, all the people that have been on the ground
at the Hancock Air Base. We have many people and attorneys, but I wanted to begin with a special thanks to you, Lance, Cornell law professor Lance Salisbury, for taking the case and working tirelessly to defend our right, our First Amendment right, to protest the drone killings since my arrest 4 years ago. We're grateful for the challenge of the illegal use of the order of protection, and we have faith in the New York State Court of Appeals that they will decide on the side of what is just and right. Thanks to the team of attorneys at the Cornell Law School that worked with you, including Professor Steve Schifrin, and also a shout out to you, Kathy Manley, who worked on one of the appeals and worked with Lance. Also Dare Irwin and all the attorneys that have worked tirelessly to step forward and to defend our right to protest the killings and also the issues in the court of DeWitt. Jonathan, well, a special thanks to New York City Civil Liberties Union attorney Jonathan Wallace, who wrote the amicus brief challenging the New York State Court of Appeals to uphold mine and also the 50 other people, our First Amendment rights to free speech. So I send a huge thanks. That's just to emphasize our huge thanks to the community of supporters who've sent their love and support through this whole process, and to all the people who put their bodies on the line, including many of my fellow perpetrators that are standing with me here. So I want to say that we also have, let's see, excuse me while I get back to my spot here. So you guys have all put your lives and your bodies on the line at the protests of U.S. killer drone sites at U.S. Air Force bases for people across the country that have also done so. So we've been protesting at Hancock Drone Base since 2010, resulting in over 200 arrests and numerous trials, appeals, numerous incarcerations, and some ending in acquittal, which we are hoping for today. So today, the New York State Court of Appeals heard the legal arguments that the order of protection, this instrument that was originally designed to protect domestic violence victims, is an inappropriate tool to be used to keep us away from the base, where assassinations of Afghan and Pakistani people are happening. And we know from court testimony that the drones are hovering over and flying 24/7 from Hancock Air Base. So as I said in my sentencing in 2014, when the judge there sentenced me to 1 year in jail, I asked, who is the real victim here? The commander of a military base whose drones kill innocent people halfway around the world, or those innocent people who are the real victims in need of protection from the terror of U.S. drone attacks? Our Afghan friend, Raz Mohammed, did have an attorney from Afghanistan send an official order of protection to Hancock Air Base for the people of his family and his village after a drone killed his brother. And his little nephew asked his mother, and he said, "Mommy, how did Daddy die?" And she answered that he was killed by a computer, referring to the computers that they send the signal for the drone strikes to happen. So according to the Bureau of Investigative Journalism, on the drone warfare page, approximately, as of today, approximately 10,000 people have been killed by drones since 2001. On this past weekend, let's see, it was the 6th was Friday, the 7th was Saturday, the 6th was the 16th anniversary of both the Afghan war, and then on the 7th was the first U.S. drone strike. So back in 2001, this all began. Today, drone attacks are worsening under the Trump administration. 751 U.S. bombs and missiles were dropped on Afghanistan just this month, the month of September, more than in any other month in nearly 7 years, higher than any month since November of 2010. So why do we Americans proceed with this policy of war and killing against people who are brown and black? So I'd like to invite us together to hear a definition of white supremacy and understand the issues of justice in the world today, including the Black Lives Matter movement, the U.S. never-ending war in Afghanistan, U.S. drone warfare in the Middle East, the Israeli occupation of Palestine, and U.S. global war and power. It's all based on this deeply held belief that goes unchecked. So I read the definition now. White supremacy is a historically based, institutionally perpetuated system of exploitation and oppression of continents, nations, and peoples of color by white peoples and nations of the European continent for the sole purpose of maintaining and defending systems of wealth, power, and privilege. A tiny example of the dehumanizing of the other, of brown people at the other end of the drone camera, is naming the drone program. The computer program is actually called Bug Splat. So we know the derogatory names used by Trump to name our Mexican brothers and sisters and the Puerto Ricans suffering from colonialization and the two catastrophic hurricanes, and what historically blacks have been called since brought in chains to this country. And we also know about our First Nation brothers and sisters. So I want to stop for a moment of silence to remember our victims, or of the victims of our racism, and to remember the dead. And this includes the genocide of Native peoples and of black people killed in the U.S. for generations, but most recently by our U.S. police. Immigrants killed on the borders in the U.S., and those killed in U.S. wars, and wars supported by the U.S., like Yemen, and by U.S. drone strikes. So we'll take a minute now. I want to end by just saying I have with me today Kathy Kelly and also Ed Kinane, who will speak. And so Kathy is from Voices for Creative Nonviolence. She's been nominated numerous times for the Nobel Peace Prize for her peace work, traveling to countries where we've been perpetuating these drone wars and other wars. So Kathy, thank you for being with us.
Well, thank you. I'm certainly one among many, many people who want to thank Mary Anne Grady Flores for her deep desire to protect other people from aerial terrorism, for her commitment to try to repent and then resist the terrible forces that have so menaced people in other parts of the world. I'm grateful to Mary Anne and to all of the people who have been linked together by the Upstate Coalition to ground the drones and to end the wars. And I have young friends in Afghanistan who've actually kept very careful track of this case. And they've been kind of aghast. They can't believe that this would be happening in the United States. And I think about Raz Muhammad, who now is the father of two. Over the course of your case, he's become married and a father of two. And he is one of many, many families directly affected by United States drone warfare. You know, it's not only the person who is in the crosshairs when somebody is declared to be a high-value target, but also when it seems that there's the possibility that a village might be the place where a battle would take place. People pick up and run because they're so frightened. And so the refugee camps are filled with people whose lives have been altered forever because of the horrors of warfare that the United States has perpetuated in Afghanistan, and now increasingly we see it happening in Yemen, and certainly with regard to Iraq. The word bug splat should make us cringe, and also the notion of somebody being a squirter. And in October 2 years ago, the United States attacked a hospital, the Kunduz hospital in Afghanistan, and the most sophisticated systems were in place so that they had people able to be connected and their screens could be visibly interlinked. And nevertheless, the United States, for an hour and 15 minutes, repeatedly bombed a particular Doctors Without Borders hospital. And I have O-negative blood, so they're always glad to see me show up at the Kabul hospital, where I had a chance to get to know a survivor of that attack. His name was Khalid Ahmed, and he had tried as a young pharmacist to run for his life as this terrible bombing was going on, and he made it just to the hospital gate. He had 1 foot outside the gate, and then a piece of shrapnel felled him. I never, ever want him to hear that in United States military parlance, he was a squirter. He survived. But his question to me was, why did people in your country want to do this to us? We were only trying to help people. And so it's with great relief, really, Mary Anne, that we turn to you and we say thank you, because we know throughout your life you have only wanted to help people. The idea that your effort to document what was happening, to make that available to others, would be criminalized, and also such a violation of the right to free speech is enormously unsettling. And so we have to hold the line. Congress shall make no law to abridge the right of people to assemble peaceably for redress of grievance. And we have a grievance, and our grievance is that we no longer want to be a country regarded as the most menacing country in the world. We want to learn to live together without killing others.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Wow. Kathy, I want to remind our viewers and listeners that the scarf from this fabric that you brought back from Afghanistan from the Afghan Youth Peace Group represents the blue skies that they've been afraid of. Living under blue skies is a threat, because that's when drones can see them. And so they say they'd rather gray skies, but they dream of the day when the skies can be blue and they can live in peace. So with that, I want to bring Ed Kinane. Come on up forward here. And Ed, well, I'll let you introduce yourself.
My name is Ed Kinane, born and bred in Syracuse, New York, just almost within walking distance of Hancock Air Base. Hancock is the home of 174th attack wing of the New York National Guard. Now, any entity that advertises that it's an attack wing, it's got to be engaging in illegal activity, which indeed Hancock Air Base is engaging in illegal activity. And Mary Anne Grady, Ann Tiffany, Julian Oldfield, John Amadon, who are all here.
And Eddie.
I was going to say.
And Charlie.
Thank you. Have been in this struggle to expose Hancock Air Base. Ellen, yes. Forgive my lapses.
No problem.
To expose Hancock Air Base in the war crimes that are continuously and proudly being committed by the personnel and their chain of command at Hancock Air Base. You know, these attacks on many countries that involve drones, weaponized robotic drones, are billed as part of a war on terrorism. That's not the truth.
That's right.
The truth is that these weaponized robotic attacks over a number of countries, particularly in the Islamic world, in the Islamic oil lands, are terrorism. So it's not a war against terrorism, it's a war of terrorism. And we need to realize that. We are out there a couple of times a month demonstrating against Hancock's war crimes. We fully intend to continue doing so, regardless of whether we risk arrest or, in Mary Ann's case, prison. You spent a bit of time in prison on this.
Jail.
You were convicted, so it's prison.
Oh.
That's my distinction anyway. I always make the distinction between prison and jail.
Jack Gilroy,
Jill,
too.
yeah, and a number of us have been in Jamesville Penitentiary, found guilty for such bogus activity, not bogus charges of trespass and disorderly contact. When in fact, what we are doing is bringing to the base people's indictments, spelling out in international law and national law how the base is violating those laws. We are performing our First Amendment rights of petitioning, seeking redress of grievance. So these orders of protection, as was ably brought out by our attorney Lance, are ways to try to suppress our free speech. Appropriately today in this place, in front of the Court of Appeals in New York State, we focus on the legal aspects because they are a weapon of the power structure. But let's not forget what the real issue is the war crimes being committed at Hancock and other bases across the U.S. in the world. Yes. Let's not lose track of that key issue. Thank you.
When do you think you're going to hear from the Court of Appeals?
We'll hear from the Court of Appeals approximately within 60 days or more. It may take up to 6 months. It's possible. But it felt, when we were in the courtroom, I think it felt like they had a sense of what they were going to decide, and so we may hear sooner. So we're looking forward to that decision. Okay, it will set a precedent also, just to finish up here, it will set a precedent not just for drone resistance, but also for people who've been to the anti-fractivist activities. The orders of protection have been used against them as well. So this sets a precedent, and so we're looking forward to a positive decision. Thanks for everybody joining us, and we'll end now. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.